Welcome everyone to another amazing video here on our channel. I'm happy to announce that our Linux distribution T2 and my company, the Exact Research GmbH here from Germany, doubling down and continue to support Itanium's, Hewlett-Packard's EPIC explicit parallel 64-bit Itanium instruction set architecture. You might have seen in the news the reporting of the death of Itanium is greatly exaggerated. Linus Torvalds and his friends, they pulled the IA-64 removal recently, on a month ago in November, to be removed with the upcoming 6.7 Linux kernel, despite multiple people not only shouting out, hey, it is working, what is the problem? Because it was previously deprecated and stuff. But yeah, people pointed out, hey, it's working, please leave it in there. People stepped up even close to our Linux distribution, developers and maintainers. We volunteer, not only it's working, here are some improvements, and we offer volunteer, we will take over maintenance. Everything was ignored. The best that was said was, be our friend, maintain it for a year externally, and if you're lucky and we are in good mood, maybe we take it back in a year or so to come. I find it rather silly, and I'm happy to announce that amazing friends to T2 and our video channel donated or hardware swapped a Itanium with me. I'm now also, that is probably somewhere wrong listing. What did I even, nothing like, I thought somehow the headline, somehow I didn't update the headline, oops. HP Integrity RX 2660 server, relatively modern dual core Intel Itanium, now sitting right to me. So we can not only build test it, but also debug stuff and use it properly. So probably shall I subscribe, can it run Quake, maybe Crysis and some other, can it run X and Wayland and Firefox? So much to come and explore. Why do I find it silly? Well, this Itanium, also I had it open earlier, but of course wiki, nothing like closing it. Those CPUs and systems were sold until recently, which is why I find this extremely silly, right? I recently made a summary of this EPIC explicit parallel instruction set architecture. Initially somewhat originated at Hewlett-Packard, not at Intel, unlike most people like to believe. Partnered with Intel for this outstanding, exceptionally different instruction bundled explicit parallel, similar to very large instruction word previous video. And first systems sold around the year 2000 until recently, end of life only some years ago, right? So what I find extremely silly in all of that is not only it's working, it's relatively modern. Systems that Itanium were supposed to replace, like MIPS, SGI, MIPS, HP, Hewlett-Packard Precision Architecture, HP PA-RISC, all of those other architectures are older, more obsolete, more deprecated, longer not in production, and still maintained in the Linux kernel. Everything from DEC Alpha to SGI MIPS stuff to Hewlett-Packard Precision Architecture. And why should Itanium so much different to just deleting it when systems like this were sold as recently as July 2021? I really appreciate to remember the times when Linux, BSD and stuff in open source was about freedom of choice and doing whatever you want with the hardware. And now kinda, yes, of course, Intel and Hewlett-Packard have deprecated, but sold until recently, some years ago. Those systems should not mean that people, like companies or individuals, hobbyists playing along at home, should not be able to use these systems for fun, for research, and for inspiration. And there are really no technical difficulties, right? It's working, yes, it's deprecated. Ironically, bin utils, you need to build, configure bin utils with dash enable deprecated or so, which like do, but not even GCC, only bin utils. But hey, it's working, right? I can power it on. I had it powered on just today. I'm here on my home desktop. This is just the serial console. I just tested its latest build. Of course, T2 has a fully functional, high performance, most optimized build than ever. You can grab from our ISOs, not empty promise. Don't delay. Go to our download site today to download the latest of T2 SDE 2312. Oh wait, this is some of the old. Yeah, we have monthly. Actually, I have 3 systems. I booted the wrong one. Anyway, latest kernel, right? Kernel maintainers close to this matter have, of course, 6.7 with Itanium reverted running, despite Linus Torvalds having it removed. It is rock solid. AMD GPU works with this old server ATI ES1000 GPU. Other users of T2 have all of XFCE running, and otherwise it is more performance than other even more deprecated and long obsolete systems like the PlayStation, and builds Lua in some seconds, Bash in some minutes, and even bin utils with ease in a very short time of just, let's look up our performance index, 6 minutes and 12 minutes, which is faster than most of the ultra-SPARC systems that ironically are still supported by the Linux kernel. I would also argue now is the golden age of people having fun with those machines at home, because with the deprecation, of course, companies begin because obviously they had their integrity, their high reliance systems, enterprise gear running, maybe still in production, most likely today. I would not be surprised if some NASA, some ESA, some space telescope, maybe even some space station, and certainly some simulators or other gear at Airbus, Boeing, and some military simulators are still running on those systems, not even to mention financial market stuff, and so on and so forth. Of course, Itanium as hardware is no longer being developed at Intel and Hewlett-Packard, but it had huge hopes at times not only to destroy PowerPC, but also, where is it? Oh, here's power. Somewhere was a quote. Why is that? Somewhere was a quote. They initially thought to destroy power, and even, do they have 2? Maybe they have Itanium and IA-64. Let's see if that, because here were some, we could run circuits around PowerPC and could kill x86. Yeah, that went well. And when envisioned and initially developed, of course, their hardware performance predictions were double and 3 times the performance of the competition. That, of course, did not particularly turn out well, given the hardware complexity and process nodes. But nonetheless, it made some dents in enterprise and high-performance computing, and why not run it and collect it, not only if it's still running. So if you have a business still depending on those financial markets, insurances, banks, telecommunication, space stations, airplane manufacturers, don't delay. Contact us today to prolong support, to reassure your business for the next decade or 2 to come. How will we maintain that? Of course, we can just revert the removal and keep calm and carry on, which is what we've done. Of course, this will be increasingly difficult. We will see if continued maintenance around T2 and the kernel will result in them accepting it. I find this argument also extremely silly, right? Show us for 1 year and we will accept it back. It's like, yeah, why delete it then, right? Because, of course, the work of maintaining it externally is significantly higher than leaving it in the kernel, and the chances are therefore much slimmer for not accepting it back in. So potentially a lot of contributors could do a lot of hard maintenance work without in a year getting that back into the Linux kernel. But on the other hand, it doesn't really matter the most. We have multiple options to long-term support that. Not only is the current kernel long-term support kernel, so certainly we could run on that for like a decade if we wanted to, but of course we will maintain that forward. So with all the packages, right now it is still in binutils and GCC, glibc. Of course the risk is that the other maintainers might eventually delete it too, which would really be annoying, but it's not more than annoying, right? Upstream people always applauded for making maintenance life easier. I would argue 99% of the maintainers, they don't even need to touch it, right? You improve something for storage, you don't touch Itanium. You improve something for Wi-Fi, you don't touch Itanium. You improve something for generic glibc algorithms, you don't touch Itanium. You improve Xorg and Wayland, or even Firefox. Spoiler alert, Firefox doesn't even support Itanium. You don't touch Itanium. Why this obsession with deleting code for a little bit obsolete, deprecated, but certainly still in production architectures? I don't understand, especially we maintain MIPS, IRIX support in GCC at times, even AIX or other slow Laris, other broken and failed Unix clone systems from back in the day. Anyway, so the possibilities are endless. Keeping old versions, like if it's deleted in GCC, binutils, eventually maybe that could of course be happen. Of course, we could always point out like, hey, it's working, and so on. But if it's deleted eventually, we could always maintain that with reversal patches and patching this stuff to work again or better. Plus, of course, the low-hanging fruit of who needs the latest GCC for maintaining this a decade or two further. We can, of course, simply like we do for AVR32 or other similar obsolete, like maybe even Blackfin. Other architectures, of course, were removed from the Linux kernel, AVR32, Blackfin DSPs, which I also find a little bit silly. There are millions of devices out there with Blackfin DSPs, TI, I believe, TI analog devices. Yeah, whoever was the manufacturer, probably TI, Blackfin DSPs, that could run Linux, MMU-less Linux, I believe, usually, although they had memory protection. MMU-less but memory protected Linux on DSPs. Removing that just because the manufacturer deprecated that when phone switches and lots of other gear from drones and whatnot, basically everywhere, certainly even potentially washing machines and satellites, this obsession of we have their good code and it's deleted, I don't understand it at all. And yeah, it's highly inconsistent, it doesn't make sense, and especially it basically takes freedom of choice from users away who might want to use it, similar to their either old Android phone, iPhone, PS3, or other fun stuff. Vintage and retro, and as I said in the introduction, now only start the golden age of home use now, that because I have basically everything except Deck Alpha, like PowerPC and stuff, and even I, maintaining a Linux distribution for 25 years, even I didn't have Itanium, right? Although I came 20 years ago, I came early in contact in my beginnings of open source stuff, because some infrastructure like mailing list of some projects were running Itanium because Intel sponsored them of giving some Debian or similar affiliated projects an Itanium system for early Linux support quality assurance. So that was the only or nearly only time I got in touch with Itanium, which I didn't have personally. I just had some remote software there running shortly, ironically 20 years ago. So even I, who was given a couple of donations, which most of the stuff I brought myself, right? But I got a handful of hardware donations over the time. Not really much, but a little bit. I'm really thankful and appreciate that, because buying everything certainly adds up, right? One Power 8 system there, one UltraSpark system there. At the end of the day, you spend some $10,000. And even I only last month hardware swapped in Itanium, right? And I otherwise have nearly everything, right? And that says a lot. So certainly, why is there not more outcry? Because people collected SGI gear because it looked amazing and they loved O2s and Octanes and PS3s and stuff, and Apple Power Macintoshes, but Itaniums simply didn't have this love because it was always this niche, high performance, highly expensive, high reliable enterprise gear, and stuff on the used second-hand market was not as widespread, was not as plentiful, and a lot of the stuff were blade servers. So by the way, better delay, don't go and buy a blade server from some used retail site like eBay today, because a lot of, yes, you can cheaply get an Itanium blade system, but without the base backbone, right? Without the base system. And so while you can get blades for $100 or $200, you cannot instantly run them, right? Either the base system chassis usually go for $1,000 or $2, and you potentially could kickstart them with an ATX power supply you load there onto the board, but I've not personally tried that. Maybe there was one other person who did that, but of course it's a more complex, error-prone, and a delicate affair than just getting such a system. So yeah, sometimes you find them on eBay, but very rarely like normal servers, like I got one now. And of course then it's 1 or 2 rack height units of relatively loud server blowing farm. As you see here, this is not even the last Itanium. Maybe someday we get a faster one. Hardware donations welcome. Like if your space telescope sightseeing has some Itanium in the attic, drop me an email, especially faster ones. And I will also try to find a second CPU socket for this dual core in one CPU socket, otherwise dual CPU socket system for probably doubling the performance. So that is the summary. In all, a really strange year for Linux. As I mentioned a couple of times, 20 years ago, the open source Linux community was about freedom and making use of your hardware and using it to the fullest extent and how your wishes. And hundreds, thousands or millions of human hours were put into reverse engineering SG Octanes or other DEC Alpha stuff, or even Intel, like even drivers, SCSI cards and stuff, let alone GPUs, right? The hundreds, thousands of hours of reverse engineering. NVIDIA CPUs. This is similar to, in a couple of times, come deleting Novo because NVIDIA GPUs are deprecated and outdated then, right? Imagine this hard work of decades hard work of getting NVIDIA CPUs somewhere and then just deleting it then because in 5 years or 10 times NVIDIA GPUs are old, obsolete, deprecated, outdated, and why not just keep it there, right? People put their hard work in there, and especially in this case, right? This was a multi-$100 billion project from Hewlett Packard and Intel. Of course, they have written most of the code in the Linux kernel, which of course were part of the multi-billion dollar development cost of the hardware and software, porting everything, and now just like this, deleting it just because it's a little bit old from yesteryear. It's like seriously, dudes, it's a strange thing, but nonetheless, if you're looking for the last Linux distribution who puts their work behind keeping Itanium alive, don't delay, download that ISO, tested by multiple people in the meantime, and this server. Give it a try, download it today, spread the word, share, like, and subscribe. And if you have any other amazing system like a PS3, Sun Ultra Spark, we have similar ISOs of increasing developers falling in love with this simply minimalistic, mostly plain vanilla, but patched to freaking work TM Linux distribution. Let's take a quick look at the comments. Welcome everyone, happy that you tuned in. We're gonna get UI setup tool or just getting basics up. Well, we have XFCE running, right? There is X running, certainly Wayland would work. I'm pretty sure probably someday I plug in a additionally PCIe GPU in there. T2 is intentionally text install like similar BSD or maybe even Debian systems, because on not all systems we have graphic, and often we install over network and serial port and serial console and such stuff. For me personally, graphic installation is of little use, but otherwise all the other, including GTK, works, including XFCE. And I will probably, as similar seen on my More Life channel, I will probably put an effort into getting some not too old version of Firefox working. One main problem is, I mentioned a couple of times, I'm not a fan of all the new software requiring all the new compilers and languages like LVM and Rust, and we don't have this for Itanium, so we are not porting this in 2023 unless you shellac from scrap. And we probably, like, if we hit 1 million in a year or two, I will port, actually an LVM port to Itanium existed 10 years ago. It was already deprecated and deleted 10 years ago. So 1 million subscriber promise, so shellac subscribe, it probably, like when we hit 1 million subscribers, I will get some form of LVM running on Itanium. But until then, we will make the last non-rust, non-oxidated version of Firefox running on Itanium sometime next year, probably first or second quarter of next year. So you will have a Firefox. Chris writes, dropping support is inconsistent with kernel team policies and how they have handled things historically. Yeah, it's like some people hate it, right? Sure, it is power hungry, it's complex. Yet it was somewhat high performance and different, and I mean it existed, right? Like between all the other existing systems, why keep, I shouldn't say it so loud, otherwise the kernel gods also delete P3 support. Yes, it is inconsistent, it makes some sense. It's like some people hate it and want it deleted by all means. I mean, recently they even applied complete useless hobbyists hobby fun of Linux for Nintendo 64, but they delete, like, which is 20 years older, makes completely no sense except scientific experiment in your home garage. It's bad. It is what it is. People don't understand it either, but Chris is joking, doesn't it violate the kernel rule of updating never breaks your system? Haha, good catch, but of course they deleted other architectures. But yes, you could theoretically argue that. But with that, you could never remove an architecture, which also is maybe not reasonable. I would argue it would make sense to delete, like I would agree to the deletion of Itanium in the Linux kernel in 10 or 20 years, like when it's sufficiently out of date, like, hey, we have SGI gear in there, right? We have Spark Station gear in there from 30 years ago, not like from 3 years ago, from 30 freaking years ago, from 1990, some Spark Station 5 goodness. And I'm not disagreeing with this. And to common misconception of people, but for the performance and maintenance and stuff, first of all, 99% of the code, like all of this code is neither compiled or run for your precious x86 or ARM64 kernel, and its drivers and architecture stuff, it cannot even be compiled, right? And the maintenance burden is also minimal. Mostly it's just API adaptations and stuff, so it's not like a super tremendous, humongous, whatever freaking pile of work. It's absolutely minimal API SED, which is also, for years, Itanium code was barely maintained and it's still freaking working, right? And we already, T2 developers, and we already fixed a couple of glibc test suite things and a memory map thing for some Itanium systems. So, like, in the 1 month, we doubled down on Itanium support. We fixed glibc test suite stuff, or like glibc correctness for test suite found. The test suite errors are also found on some other architectures, and not even the most important, but hey, a couple of those math, like floating point math, were fixed, and Itanium kernel booting on some different systems for memory map reasons also fixed, right? Like in just 4 weeks. And we have only started to take it over. Anyway, you will find this work in T2. If you want to support this stuff, you will find a Patreon, YouTube membership, GitHub sponsorship, or just here's some direct PayPal stuff. Otherwise, don't delay. Give this download a try and build from source. People who try it out usually love it. Leave in the comments below what you have tried, what systems you want to use. A DEC Alpha is of course working also. It shows I maintain T2 for fun for 25 years. I never had the DEC Alpha and I never had an Itanium, and both systems worked because I just cross-compiled and maintained the stuff to the best of my knowledge. And both systems, I think DEC Alpha, it worked with minimal install quirks, and Itanium also mostly worked except some initial compiler hiccupery, but like it booted, it shot some, was like the maintainer. I'm just not sure if people want their names so much promoted out here, but you will find the names in the T2 changelog and surrounding kernel patches and stuff. So they could get T2 installed with my cross-compiled ISO that I provided. Like everything worked except some small kernel tweaks, which probably they could fix in some days and stuff. So, and now it's fixed, right? So figure that. And the Linux Foundation has over 200 million in funding, and they can't support it with their 3.2% of Linux kernel funding because it's too complicated. But I keep it maintained without even the hardware until 2.5 weeks ago. Share, subscribe, give it a thumbs up. I hope you enjoy it too, and to see you soon for all the next fun stuff like playing with Itanium, running Firefox. And will it run Quake 3 and which other open source, like coming up next now that T2 runs and is amazing on architectures, which systems like the SG Octane or HPP ARISC, IA-64 Itanium can run, like let's play Quake, like now we can have fun, right? Now that we've fixed everything, let's play Quake 3 and leave me in the comments below which other systems, like can it run Crysis? There was some Crysis release, source code release, right? Not GPL, not free to use, but there is some source, you can take a look. Is there an open source buildable version of Crysis? Can we compile and run? Because obviously we don't want to run Crysis hardware emulated, right? Because it would be slow. So the question is there enough Crysis source code out there to compile it for Itanium and then run Crysis on Itanium? And I hope to see you soon for all this fun stuff to come. And here, just, where's my freaking mouse? Oh yeah, right. This is the second display. It's like, it's a TV display. If you have amazing games to run, leave in the comments below, right? So that I don't need to ask Google, but can go straight to this video and go to the GitHub pages of whatever. And of course, what we can package. We can, if the Crysis source code is halfway decent, maybe it's only the engine without the game support code, I have not checked. But we could even package it, but not put it on our mirrors, right? So if we find stuff that's not as, was it GPL, the Quake engine from ID, from it? But if there is source out there, we could have a T2 package recipe how to build it, just not have it on our mirror for legal reasons, obviously. So see you next time for this fun.